Hi, I'm Amy Burton, and I'm with Amy Burton Counseling. I'm a therapist in Overland Park, Kansas, but I'm also a mom of 6 children, ranging in age from 17 down to 8. So, before we start this parenting course, I want to offer a disclaimer. So, I am not here to tell you how to raise your kids. The purpose of these videos and of this course is not to pretend that I know your kids better than you do. I am simply here to offer you the latest research and some common themes that I hear from my adolescent patients, and also my own ideas and insights coming from both my roles as a therapist and a mom. Being a parent is by far the hardest job I have ever had. Do you remember back to when your oldest child was a newborn, up all night with a crying baby, feeding issues, trying to figure out what they need? I remember thinking that I was going through the hardest possible time of my life. What could be harder than pregnancy, childbirth, and a newborn? Well, if you're anything like me, you've learned that that colicky little newborn was nothing compared to raising a teenager in the 21st century. I clarify the 21st century because I truly believe that there hasn't been a more difficult time in our history to raise a teenager than now. So for this week, we're going to talk about connection versus correction. So do you remember back when your kid was just in love with you? I can remember when my son was about 4 years old, and he used to collect his sister's little plastic rings so that he could propose to me. So he went through this phase when he would regularly get down on one knee with a plastic ring in his hand and ask, "Will you be married to me, Mommy?" And I would act surprised and elated, and I'd exclaim, "Oh, yes!" And he'd put the ring over my first knuckle and leap into my arms, and he'd say, "Oh, thank you, Mommy, for being married to me." Well, at the time, I thought there was nothing that could ever diminish that connection that we had. But you know what? So now when I've gone back and asked him if he remembers all those times he proposed to me, he doesn't at all. In my mind, it feels like it was last summer, but in reality, it was about 9 years ago. Do you remember when your child was between 3 and 10 years old and you could set up play dates for them? So you could basically just choose their friends, right? By just ordering up their schedule. So you just set up play dates for them with kids that you approve of, and you're golden. Parenting was so much easier back then. Well, now we have teenagers. And so if you guys are anything like me, there are times when you feel completely disconnected from your child. So let's talk about what might be happening. So according to Michael Riera, all parents get fired by their kid as the manager of their life. Okay, let me say that again. All parents get fired by their kid. You might be thinking, no, you're not going to fire me, but this happens. You've probably noticed it, and it happens in multiple ways depending on the kids, but at some point, all kids will fire you. I'm talking like a teenager. So preteen, early teen, they'll come to a point where they just don't want to hear your advice. They don't care what you want to say. They want you to get out and leave them alone. So if you recognize yourself getting fired, first thing I want to tell you is that it is normal and it happens. But don't worry, because I can help you get rehired. There's just one catch in getting rehired. You cannot be rehired as their manager, or as I like to say, their momager. You cannot be rehired as the momager. But you do have 3 other choices. Let's talk about those. So the first choice, when you recognize you've been fired by your kid as their manager, the first option is you can quit. You can just quit. So do you guys know parents who just quit parenting? It's like they've decided to just give up. They don't help their kids. They don't have a relationship with them. They just seem to sort of coexist in the same house together, like they're just waiting until their kid turns 18 to kick them out. I bet you know people like that. I know people like that. They just kind of quit. So option number 2 is that you can be the cool mom or the cool dad. don't know if you guys have seen Mean Girls, but there's a part where she says, "I'm the cool mom. I'm the cool mom." So these parents that are particularly concerned with being cool to their kids, they don't give their kids a curfew. These maybe are the parents who buy alcohol for their kids, and they might tell their kids if they're going to smoke weed, then at least smoke it at home. So they're the kind of parents who will get a hotel room for their son and his date for a prom night. That's the cool mom or the cool dad parent. So let's talk about option 3, which you may have guessed it would be my preference. So option number 3 is you can be rehired as your child's consultant. So a consultant is there to listen to you when you need an expert opinion. Consultant helps you think about what you might choose to do. I like to use the verbiage of walking alongside your teenager or your child through adolescence. I like the visual of that, of literally sort of walking alongside. So you're not in front of your kid, pulling them along, like follow along with what I say and do, and just be a good follow, what your parent says. And you're not standing behind your kid, pushing them into activities or pushing them to achieve things that maybe they don't care about, but you're just walking alongside with them. There's walking alongside. And I like that. I like the thought of that, and I like the visual of that. We must switch from a manager role to a consultant role. We must do that when we have a teenager or maybe even a preteen. Now, this isn't about completely taking a back seat in their life. It's actually about interacting strategically with them. Some parents are going to struggle to adjust to the demands that parenting their child through the teenage years brings. It's a time that can put even the strongest and most loving relationships to the test. But your child actually needs you at this time just as much as they have always needed you. They just need you in a different way. You'll have to shift out of that consultant role if their health or safety is at risk. In times like this, it can be ugly. In these hopefully rare times when you actually have to put your foot down, you'll be coming out of that consultant role and having to briefly manage again. If done wrong, these times can cause a serious rift in your relationship. But if done right, they can actually be therapeutic. So let's talk about what it looks like to be a consultant who walks alongside their teenager. So I'm going to give you some thoughts, ideas about what exactly that looks like. Walking alongside your teenager means, first of all, means being present. So you have to find times that you don't have to work. There have to be times when you're home and when you're with your kid. I can't, and even in those times when you are with your child, say at home or you're doing something, take them out to a restaurant or something, in those moments when you're actually together and present, you've got to put your phone down. I cannot tell you how many times I talk to teenagers in my office who say they wish their parents would put their phone down while they're talking to them. It's sad, actually. You hear parents complain about their kids having their phones out all the time. I hear so many kids talk about their parents having their phones out all the time. Nothing tells your teen that you are literally not there for them, like being glued to your cell phone. But even more than physical availability, your child will sense your emotional availability. Parents who have a close relationship with their teens often say that as their teen has gotten older, they've made it a practice to drop everything else if their teenager signals a desire to talk. This can obviously, it's dangerous. This can be, or not dangerous, it can be difficult if you have a demanding job, if you have other responsibilities, if you have other children that you are caring for as well. But kids who feel that other things are more important to their parents often look elsewhere when they're emotionally needy. If you want your teenager to open up to you and rely on you emotionally, you have to let them know that you're available to them. So another idea is that walking alongside your child isn't walking against them. So what I mean by this is to be on your kid's side and remind them when needed, hey, I'm on your side, or you know what, I'm on your team. So don't make things hard for your kids. You don't have to be this gruff authoritarian to be a good parent. On the contrary, be on their side. Assume the best in them. Although sometimes you have to verify information, but for the most part, and as often as possible, show them that you just aren't against them. Another thought is to say yes as much as possible. So my friend and fellow therapist David Robbins, he encourages parents of teenagers when a teenager will ask their parents if they can do something. He encourages parents to say, tell me what I need to hear to be able to say yes. What that means is, tell me where you're going, who are you going with, who's driving, is your homework done, are your chores finished, when will you be back home, things like that. What exactly are you going to be doing? So when you say, tell me what I need to hear to be able to say yes, that means give me all the details. You know what I'm going to ask you. Give me all the details so I can say yes to you because I want to say yes. Sometimes parents who miss the mark in that situation, when a teenager says, can I go do whatever? Parents who miss the mark will say things like, are you kidding? I know you haven't done your chore. I know you haven't done this or that. Or your grades are blah, 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 blah. Or you can't, I know so-and-so is a bad influence. I know that this person's not good for you. They just kind of assume the worst instead of showing their kid, I want to say yes. Give me all the information I need to know to be able to say yes. Walking alongside your teenager also means just being helpful. So find out what they need for their activities. Or find out what they need to learn how to drive. Find out what they need, if they need your help before going to prom. Just make sure that they have the things that they need and that, you find out what they need and you provide that for them. That they know that you're there, Another point is that you need to be involved. And it almost seems silly to have to say this, but, go to their games. Volunteer to help at their fundraiser car wash, sponsor the choir programs, just show up, show up. We have kind of a motto in our family I throw out every once in a while. I say, Burton's show up. I say that to my kids when my son doesn't want to go to his sister's, show choir concert, or when our daughter doesn't want to go to her sister's spelling bee competition. So I'll say, well, Burton's show up, which means we all show up for each other. We're there. We show up. We're going to be sitting in the audience for her, just like we're going to be sitting in the audience for you, and we show up. I think it's important for kids to know in our family, we show up for each other. We do. We make it a point to be there. 5 little words that you can say that might make a big difference in situations like this. So let's say after a performance or after a game. I love to watch you blank. So on the way home from, let's say, a soccer game, I love to watch you play soccer. I love to watch you play goalie. I love to listen to you sing. I love to watch you swim in these swim meets. So just say that. I love to watch you blank. Tell your kids that and let them know you love to watch. It's important to them, and you're going to boost their esteem and make them feel like you really care. Let me talk about the number one most important part of walking alongside your child through adolescence. So what do you think it might be? The very most important part of walking alongside your kids through adolescence is listening to them, empathizing with them, and keeping your advice to a minimum. It doesn't matter how good your advice is. Every time you offer it, you're giving your teen the message that they can't solve their own problems. Be a sounding board for them, but not a prescriber. If you can accomplish that and master it, you will find your teenager coming back for more. It's imperative, and it's so hard. It is so hard not to give advice to a kid, especially when something seems so blaringly obvious to you, you just need to do it like this, or you just need to do it like that. In times like that, really try to hold your tongue and and listen to them and empathize with them and keep your mouth shut as best you can. If you can do that, they will continue to come back. Kids often do not want you to solve their problems. And it's not unlike couples. So if you are married, if you've been married or had a serious relationship, oftentimes, I'm going to be gender specific, oftentimes a woman might be like, she's just talking about what happened, or talking about some problem at work or something. And the man will say, oh, well, you just need to XYZ. And the woman walks away from that kind of ticked off because she didn't need him to solve the problem, right? She just needed him to listen and empathize and validate her feelings. Kids are kind of the same way, especially teenagers. They don't always want you to solve their problem for them. They often would really prefer that you just listen and validate them and empathize with them. Tell them how hard this must be. It goes a long way when you see them more as somebody who needs to be soothed instead of somebody who needs to be fixed. So if you can listen without judgment and then seek to understand their concerns and their challenges, you will be golden. A slightly new topic, let's talk about independence. So let's talk about why you have been fired as your teen's manager. It has to do with being independent. So as children become teenagers, they will naturally crave independence. In fact, it's necessary that they become independent from their parents. So just as necessary as it is for them to become independent, it's necessary for parents to build a bridge of connection with them. We often assume that teenagers who are close to their parents are maybe less independent in their lives, but according to research, that's actually just not true. In fact, young adults who feel that they can share honestly with their parents say that they feel free to make independent decisions and don't feel the need to rebel against their parents' expectations. I'm going to say that again. So young adults who feel that they can share honestly with their parents say they feel free to make independent decisions and don't feel the need to rebel against their parents' expectations. That's pretty huge. It's appropriate for your kids to become increasingly independent throughout their teen years, but it's critical for most of those years for parents to remain their teens' emotional and moral compass. Kids will begin to experiment with intimate relationships outside of the family, friendships, girlfriends, boyfriends, but to do that successfully, they still rely on those intimate relationships at home remaining solid. Do you actually want to know the biggest predictor of how early your child will become sexually active? According to Dr. James Dobson, the closer your child is to their parents, the longer they'll wait. That statistic really spoke to me, because we all want our kids to wait a little longer, right? Or a lot longer. You being close to them and having a close emotional relationship could actually make a pretty big difference. It's important that parents recognize that their teens' fierce need for independence doesn't mean that they can't stay connected to you. It may seem like a bit of an oxymoron, but it's really not. It's them becoming independent but still having a relationship with you. If you can let your teen exercise their own judgment and be themselves rather than to be who you want them to be, they'll be able to grow into age-appropriate independence without cutting you off. But if, on the other hand, you insist that they play the sport that you love, or you insist that they agree with your political views, then your teen will have to choose between a relationship with you and what they feel is really their integrity. Attempting to parent when your relationship is damaged is like pushing a boulder uphill. It's never too late in your relationship with your child to do repair work and to move closer, but it's a whole lot harder to build that strong connection that you want if the foundation isn't there. The influence that you have over your child is more dependent on a trusting relationship than it is on how much authority you dish out and how many lectures you give. It may feel like they're trying to push you away, but they're actually trying to push themselves away from you to choose a direction in life and to shape an identity for themselves as a separate, independent person. So love, support, trust, and optimism from their family make them feel really secure and safe. And those are actually really powerful weapons against peer pressure and depression and anxiety. Those are some of life's, biggest challenges. The basics of supportive parents. So let's talk about, as a supportive parent or as a consultant parent, your aim is to keep your child safe, obviously, and to give them the foundation that they need to do their very best. So at minimum, they need to know that they are loved for who they are and that you are always there for them and you always support them. It's also going to be really important that your teenager feels that you respect them and that you have respect for their friends. You have respect for their clothing choices, maybe for their sports or the type of music that they listen to, maybe their interests. So they need to know that you accept them just the way that they are, even if they like, gangster rap, or even if they are diehard Democrats or, conservatives or whatever that looks like. They need to know that you love them just the way that they are and that you accept them and that you support them. Well, this concludes our very first video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please log in to our private Facebook group for homework and support, including details on our Facebook Live video, where I will be answering your questions about this week's topic. Bye-bye.